Hey everyone, it's Ryan 1940 here. Today we're taking a look at Sea Power Naval Combat in the Missile Age, and this is a video about flags. Like, how boring, right? Well, a lot of you guys have asked in comments below in some other videos, like, what the heck do these flags mean? Do they have any meaning? Are they random? And some of you guys have actually deciphered what they mean. There is an international standard of the alphabets that is used on these flags. The US Navy uses it. So do a lot of, everybody at sea does. And so some of you more diligent folks out there have spotted that it says F yeah, so this is the F word, F yeah. It's kind of an Easter egg. So what the heck do these flags actually mean though? Because they do have alphabetic meanings, but within that, in the nautical world, they also have really specific meanings. And that's how we can communicate to others if our radio systems aren't working, or just as a general way to increase awareness of what's happening with the ship. Even if our radios did work, we would still fly these flags. So one that we can see here, and we can talk about really quickly, is the Foxtrot flag. So in Navy operations, this would be flown if it's closed up. That means if the flag is up on the yardarm like that, then that means you are conducting fixed wing operations. So an aircraft carrier would fly that, or an amphib. And I think if it's at the dip, that means that you're preparing to do, or you're preparing to receive aircraft. When I say at the dip, it's kind of like when the flag is partially down like that. If we got this guy over here, this one also has dual meanings, which is pretty interesting. The hotel flag, normally you'll see this on pictures of ships when they're coming into harbor. You'll see this flag closed up, which is at the top. And that basically is letting everyone know that you've got a pilot on board. So what is a pilot? Well, a pilot is, a lot of times when you pull into a bunch of different places, it's mandated that you have a pilot on board because it could be kind of tricky with the local currents or whatever, and you are a wandering ship, you're not familiar with the area, so just for everyone's safety, we have a pilot that comes on board, and it's a local employee of the harbor. They are the specialists, so they have commanded ships to pull into their harbor for a long amount of time, so they know kind of all the ins and outs, and they can identify things when they become dangerous or not that may not be obvious to regular ship crew. So they'll come alongside, usually around here or on midships. They'll lower Jacob's ladder, then they'll have to climb on board, and you can see kind of if it's really stormy, a small boat coming alongside, it might be a little tricky that they manage, and they get escorted up to the bridge, and they kind of tell the bridge team like how to drive the ship to get it in safely. And so the hotel flag would show them that, or show everybody that you've got the pilot on board. A lot of times you have, if you look in pictures also, when this is up, you'll see, especially for US Navy ships, you'll see a November flag, which is a checkered white and blue flag. At the top, it'll always start with November, and then there'll be 3 other letters. So this is the rents. What this is the call sign. So all Navy ships, they start with, US Navy ships specifically, they start with November as the call sign, first letter, and then there's 3 other letters to delineate what that ship is. They're not secret. You can actually go on like Wikipedia and see them because they're radio call signs. So it's important that you'd have that up so that if people try to hail you specifically, they can call you by your call sign and get a hold of you. So for the rents, this would be, I think, November, Golf, Sierra, Romeo, and you'll have the hotel flag up. So basically you see that, you often see that in pictures, because if the pilot wasn't on board yet, a lot of times we'll have our call sign up just in case they need to call us specifically. They can see what our call sign is. But they can hail us some other ways. A lot of times people just say like Warship 46. That'd be another way to talk to the ship. So other flags. I got on quite a tangent there. For the hotel flag, it means the pilot's on board, but also in Navy operations, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong because this was a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure the hotel flag is when you're doing helicopter flight operations on the small boys. So that would be, if you look at pictures of ships doing flight ops, you'll see the flag hoisted, the hotel flag hoisted on the yardarm if you can spot it a good angle. Speaking of that, this is another side here. The reason that this guy cannot take SH-60s and can only take the SH-2 is because this giant capstan right here. And a capstan, this one, you can take it to power, so when the ships pull in and out, we use 6 lines, and we call them lines, but they're actually whatchamacallit, they're actually doubled up. So there's actually 12 lines, but there's 6 stations. You can think of it that way. So each of these 6 stations will have 2 lines. Line 6, which is the aftmost line, and it could be line 6 could be here, it could be here, but that's just the position. Those are the cross lines, and they kind of, it's one of the cross lines. The other one's on the bow, line 1. 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 are spring lines, so they actually crisscross each other, and that kind of keeps the ship from sliding forward and aft on the pier. But anyways, the capstan you can take to power, and you can use that to help pull the ship in if you didn't have, if you had some sort of tricky mooring situation, or you can actually use it to, when you're leaving, you get all the lines on deck except for line 6, and then if you take, when this is singled up, when there's 1 line here left, because usually there would be 2 for like extra strength. When you get it singled up, there's only 1 left and all the other ones are off. You can take this to power, and you can kind of, depending on how you drive it, you can swing the ship out. We didn't quite do that a lot on the OHPs because these guys have little bow thrusters. Not bow thrusters, but there's APU, like auxiliary power units, that come down underneath the hull. They pop out, and they can drive the ship at like a crawl at like, I don't know, 2 to 5 knots. And the reason Navy put that on these frigates is because they're only single screw. So if this was out or fouled or whatever, you need to be able to make way a little bit so that you can keep moving. Anyways, the SH-60s couldn't land here because this gigantic capstan can be moved, right? So the long hull versions that came out, they extended the deck a little bit, and there's a poop deck down here, and actually the capstan sits perfectly in that poop deck, so like now the tail rotor of the SH-60 wouldn't risk hitting that thing. So that's kind of why some of that design changes were made on the long hulls to accommodate that helicopter. So yeah, back to flags. We're looking at, there's some other ones that aren't here, and well, actually one of the things I wanted to comment on was the ensign. So the ensign is, they call this the pig staff, is what I remember that we used to call that thing. I said in some other videos, this also, the flag is shifted when we pull in and out. So when we pull out to sea, they'll say underway, shift colors, and then this thing here, the stern mast, would be where the ensign was when we're parked in port. They'd lower that flag, and then somebody else would raise another one up here immediately, and then that's when all the lines are like taken in. When we moor, they'll say moored, shift colors, and that's when all the lines are doubled up. We're attached to the pier. They will lower this ceremoniously, and they will quickly raise the flag over here on the stern mast. Now in reality, this is removed when we're out to sea. It collapses down, but you can, they're just like little cotter pin things that you pull out, and you can open this door that would be here, and this is the TP way you'd clamp this on the bulkhead in there. And that'd be just kind of stowed out of the way, so it's not a big trip hazard. That'd be kind of scary. And also on the flags, when we're out to sea, actually also when we're in port, it never changes. There's a thing called the commissioning pennant, and it's like a little streamer that's got, near the hoist part of it, it's blue, and then there's 7 white stars, and there's the rest of it, the length of it is split between red and white, a single red and white stripe that goes down it. It's normally about like 4 to 6 feet long. It's not very long. I think the longest one is 6 feet. Most of them are kind of like 3 to 4 feet. But the commissioning pennant stays on the ship. It stays up the entire time that the ship is like in service. Okay, so once it's commissioned until it's decommissioned, that pennant stays up there, and it goes back a long, long time. Navy ships, if you look at old ones before the time of like radars and stuff, where there's, things that can get tangled. Some of the commissioning pennants back then were crazy long. They'd be like a foot or half a foot at the hoist part of it, and then the actual fly part of it would be like 60 feet long. You'd see these crazy streamers. And some of the sailing games, I think if you look at them, those are those streamers that you see on the mast of the ships. So yeah, we don't have them that long anymore, but they would be kind of small, and you'd see them on top of the American flag. Sometimes with flags also, depending on who has operational control, You might flag another flag. Like, for instance, on this ship, I remember specifically, when we do anti-drug operations, the military is not allowed to be law enforcement, right? That's a distinction that we carry out in our military in the United States. So to get around that, we have a law enforcement detachment that comes on board, U.S. Coast Guard. Okay, they are a law enforcement activity or branch, and so they come on board, and when we do our boardings, they're the ones actually conducting it, but we support them. And so when we're actually doing a drug bust, we'll raise the Coast Guard pennant, and that shows everybody that they have operational control or tactical control of our unit, and we're basically following their orders to help conduct the operation. On the bow here, when we pull in, there's a jackstaff, and that would have a blue flag with 50 stars. When in my time, we were at war, so there was an order from, I think, SecNav at the time, and we actually had a different one, and it was the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. And that's another jack that gets flown. But then they said the war was magically over, so they went back to the old one, which is the stars and the blue background, and only the oldest commissioned ship is allowed to carry or to use that "Don't Tread on Me" flag when we're in that kind of state. So right now it's the USS Blue Ridge, which is a very old command ship for 7th Fleet, I think. Yeah, so that's about it for the flags. Some of the special flags we could talk about. Bravo is the red flag, and you would raise that when you're taking on like dangerous things or handling dangerous things like ammunition. And a lot of times when you see Bravo flag, you'll see another flag called the Lima flag, which is it's like a black and yellow checkered flag. So kind of like that, but just black and yellow. And that, I think, if I remember correctly, is radiation hazard. So you do that when you don't want people around you to be radiating. A lot of times it's because you might be worried about the electromagnetic interference of some ammunition, and you don't want them to like accidentally discharge. So we'll oftentimes have our walkie-talkies off and all that other stuff turned off just for extra safety, and that's typically when you see the Bravo flag out as well, because that is the time that you're handling ammunition. Now you've got some other ones like Oscar's a big one. That's man overboard. So it's kind of like a red and yellow diagonal striped flag. We don't really have one like that here, and you fly that if there's man overboard. A lot of times, if there was a man overboard, you've got you see all these people topside. Whoever spotted the man overboard would raise the alarm, and then anybody topside would just start to point at the person, and they would the horns would go off basically, and the ship would just come about, and the people on the bridge wing would look to see who saw what happened, and they would basically follow these guys' arms pointed. You stay pointed at the person, and so we come about and go try to retrieve them. And a lot of times the boat man overboard would be called over the 1MC, so the announcement system, and then the boat crew would assemble. They'd get the boat in the water, try and go fish this guy out. You can also pick up people from these things. These are the J-bar davits. Actually use them for getting some people on deck that were kind of sick on the Arleigh Burke class destroyer I was on. Never really used these on the frigate, but that would be a way to hoist up stuff like that. So we'd come about, and then we'd hopefully find them. Everybody else on the ship would actually have to run to a muster station, and then they would take an exact head count of everybody. So it would be so exact that you would know exactly who that person is in the water, because you would know everybody that is on board at that point. It's that detailed, and it has to be, so that we can figure out who's missing and understand if there's multiple people in the water or not. And it's pretty nuts. So this kind of time period, like in the winter time off the coast of San Diego, or off the coast of SoCal, Southern California, you don't have a lot of time in the water in your normal uniform. You could probably be in there for like 20 minutes and you might become hypothermic. San Diego, off the coast of Southern California in general, there's a lot of cold upwelling that comes from the Kuroshio current, and so the water can be absolutely frigid cold. when I was on the destroyer off San Diego, I remember doing boarding operations just like for training in the wintertime in a storm, and it was ice cold water. It was the most worst thing I had to sit and endure, like on the small boat, because you've got all that wind blowing on you, and you're just wet with the cold water spray, and the wind is just making it even more frigid. Yeah, it was not fun. And I remember once we got back on board, everybody stripped naked and just basically ran down to berthing nude to just run into the showers to get out of their freezing cold clothes and just get hot water on their bodies to warm up again. So yeah, it'd be kind of cool if we can see. It won't ever happen, I'm sure, but like if you wanted to add color but have it in a functional way, like just know when flags would be used for, like maybe the helicopter operations have the hotel flag come up when you're starting to launch helicopters and lower it when the helicopter's gone. You got some other ones, like some other pertinent flags would be Romeo if we were doing an unrep. This is my little unrep scenario. Where's the unrep ship? There it is. Romeo is a red flag with like a really thin yellow cross in it, and depending on what's happening, you can have it at the dip, which is like halfway down, remember, on the control ship, and that would tell the other guys like, hey, I'm ready to receive you alongside. We would have it at the dip as well to say, okay, we're ready to come alongside. They would close up Romeo, and that would initiate, that would tell them, or they would be telling us that they're ready to receive our ship or to commence our approach, and we would close up Romeo saying, okay, we're commencing our approach, and so that way everyone can see what's happening. Some other flags, one of the ones no sailor wants to see is the Papa flag, which is this is in port. It would be a blue flag that's got like a big white square in the center of it, and that would tell, if you saw it, that means that personnel they've been recalled back to the ship. We got to get underway, basically. So if you're out on Liberty, that kind of sucks. It means Liberty's over, something's happened, you guys got to leave immediately. The Mike flag is a blue flag with a crisscross white stripe, and that is going to tell you that there's a medical guard ship. So basically, a medical guard ship is in port. You know, on the ship, like for instance the frigates, you normally had one, we call them doc. They're not a doctor though, they're really the equivalent of like a nurse practitioner. They're corpsmen, or independent duty corpsmen. We call them doc. And we have another guy or gal, well, on the frigate it would be a guy, would be baby doc, and baby doc is just a regular corpsman. So they could be straight from boot camp and out of A school to the fleet, or they could have been on the ship already for a few years. So they got varying levels of experience, but there's only like 2 of them. And so if you're in port, it kind of sucks for them, because say we're in port for like 4 days. If the rest of the ship is in 3 or 4 section duty, that means you, like, 1 night out of 3 nights you've got to stay on board and do all the duty stuff, like stand watch while everyone's out partying. For them, if there's only 2 of them, 1 person has to stay on board. So really every other night they have to come back or have duty the next morning. So it kind of sucks. So to get around that, if we have multiple ships in a port, because we've pulled in on deployment with some other small ships as well, we can kind of divvy out the duty to the other ship. So Mike flag on the pier would signify that ship is the medical guard ship, and so that means if anything happens medically for all the ships around in company, they would go to that ship to get their health care. So that way the 2 guys here on this boat can actually go out on Liberty, and then the next day maybe our ship had it, so one of them would have to have duty, and the other one can go out on Liberty still. So it kind of just extends the amount of Liberty time that the docs can get and baby docs can get. So I think that's about it for the flags. Really cool stuff. Hope you guys learned a little history and got some knowledge on what these flags actually mean. It'd be kind of cool if you could, the call signs for the ships, they're not secret or anything. It's a way that we broadcast that visually so that people can identify us and talk to us if they need to. A lot of times they'll say the call sign, or they'll say something like this, like they'll say Warship 46, or we'll call ourselves Warship 46. so that people around us can identify who we are talking and deconflict stuff. So anyways, it'd be kind of cool if you can put that in the game. If not, I totally understand it, but that is a way to add color in a meaningful way. You'd see the call sign up there. Obviously in combat, you're not going to see all these flags. You don't want to tell, if depending on what you're doing, you don't want others to see, right? If you're operating by yourself, you know what you're doing. You don't want the bad guys or any potential like AGI vessel tracking you, watching what you're doing and understanding what you're doing by seeing your flags. So you just wouldn't fly them. You'd often just see these flags when you're in port or coming in and going out of port with your call sign. But anyways, yeah, that's a little bit of color. There would be a little pennant here that would be on all the U.S. Navy ships. The commissioning pennant stays there the entire time the ship's in service. But yeah, remember, like I said earlier, I didn't like the flags. When I first saw the game, I was like, nah, they don't do that. But it's kind of grown on me with the colors and stuff, It does add colors and movement to the otherwise boring mass. Like this stuff right here, this is actually not, these are not for flags. It was pretty good that they're not there. These are actually fan wires, so they're like an antenna system. So there's one on each side there. On the Arleigh-Burkes, if you look closely, if you're looking at like the front of them, you'll see the fan wires come down from one of the yard arms and they'll go to the top of the bridge on each side. So those aren't lines for flags or anything, those are just antennas. So anyways, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. If I got anything wrong, correct me please. It's been a long time. I learned all this stuff back when I was getting my ESWAS pin like 2 decades ago. So pretty crazy. But yeah. This is all kind of stuff every sailor needs to know when they're in the Navy, especially if you're trying to get your warfare pin on the ship. You got to know what all those flags mean, all their side meanings, all the alphabetical meanings, all the numerical meanings they've got, that kind of stuff. And if you get all that information correct, then they might reward you with that pin. So anyways, yeah, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye!